Everybody's ready? Yes.
Áno, pripravený.
Ready.
Mr. Rozlosnik.
Ďakujem pekne.
Thank you very much indeed.
You're appearing as a witness in this case, and you're expected to tell the truth. Can you read, please, the statement in front of you?
Áno, to urobím. Vyhlásenie svedka.
I shall do that. Witnessed statement. I solemnly declare on my honor and conscience that I will say the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Direct examination?
No, Mr. President, none.
Okay.
I'm not sure that what I'm supposed to answer.
Oh, you just answered. No question has been asked yet.
Pardon.
That's okay, I apologize.
Now, cross-examination, Mr. Pekas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Rozložník. My name is Rostislav Pekas.
Ďakujem. Ďakujem vám veľmi pekne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pekar.
I am counsel for the Slovak Republic, and I will be asking you a few questions about your witness statement and certain documents that you have authored or which are otherwise in the record.
Áno, mám to pred sebou.
I have it with me, which I have submitted myself in Slovak language.
Thank you, sir. There are sometimes some small translation issues that we have detected in the documents. Most often we have Slovak terms that were translated in two different ways. So it may happen that I will use a Slovak expression when asking the question, and I apologize in advance to the court reporters and everybody. I know that it's not easy, but those are things we need to rectify.
Máte plnú pravdu, to som aj...
You're absolutely right. I found the same, actually, in fact, that the English translation is not matching with the original text, and terminologically, there's some terminology which is not matching.
Also apologize in advance if I start asking a question too early, because I will not be working on the translation. I will always try to let some time for the translators. Okay, Mr. Rozložník,
Je to v poriadku.
It's quite all right with me.
I think you have been maybe explained by your counsel how this exercise works. I will be showing you some...
I did not receive a real detailed explanation, but I'm quite sure I will be able to handle this.
Okay, I will explain that to you. I will direct you to some parts of your witness statement or to some parts of the documents that are in the binder in front of you. I will ask you questions. I will try to ask very simple questions, but if you need me to rephrase them, please feel free to tell me and I will do my best. My first question...
Poriadko, súhlasím.
It's okay with me, I agree.
Thank you. My first question relates to paragraph 5 of your witness statement.
No.
And there you explain your position in the Rosmin company.
Áno.
Can you see that?
Áno, mám to pred sebou.
Yes, I can see it in front of me.
I ask you what term you have used in the Slovak version of your witness statement to describe your position.
No, ja by som
I would describe it in Slovak that I was executive officer within the commercial act as enacted in Slovakia. Of course, there are English terms used as a managing director or something like that, but in Slovak we have executive officer.
Thank you. That was my impression as well, and you said a while ago that you wrote your witness statement in Slovak. So how come that you use the wrong term in the Slovak version?
No,
You know how it is. The translation was mainly done from English, and there was an email communication there as well. So somewhere misunderstandings did occur, because I'm operating in the city of Rožňava all the time, and when we were communicating with Vienna, there could have been some terminology shortcomings. But basically, it does not change anything about the substance of the whole matter at hand, what title they're going to attribute to me.
Carefully, and this is the only translation mistake that you have detected.
nie tak našiel som.
No, I have found more. For instance, as a geologist, I cannot allow myself called talc as a mineral, as a ore, in fact. But the way I've written it, they make sure it's correct in English language. But for Slovak experts, I would never call it that way. What would the,
And I will, in English, use the term executive for konateľ to make clear the difference between managing director and executive in the Slovak language. So
Použil som to slovo, hej, je to exekutív.
I did use it because it's an executive function within the company.
that as an executive, you had a legal duty to make sure that Rosmin, the company where you were the executive, does business in strict compliance with Slovak law.
Isté, že to mi je úplne jasné.
Of course, I fully understand that.
It was also your duty as an executive to prepare the financial statements of the company and annual reports for shareholders.
Vypracovať
Not to produce it, we had auditors to do that, who would process the information. We had an economist who would keep the entire bookkeeping, and I'm a geologist. I'm not as well versed in accounting, but when the accounting was being verified and I've signed it, I did make sure it was all correct.
That an executive in a Slovak company has to sign those annual reports
isté, že.
Yes, certainly.
for their accuracy.
A zodpovedám.
And yes, I am responsible for the accuracy. I have to rely on the auditors and the people. And some of the misunderstandings, something I misunderstood, I had it explained to me, and only then I would sign it. I would never sign it automatically in any case.
And you also represented Rosmin in the various administrative proceedings relating to the issuance of all the permits which were needed for the construction of the mine. Is that correct?
Isté, že je to.
Yes, indeed, that's correct. Because in the first stage, I was the first executive, after which Mr. Heidecker came in as a second executive. So we had the right of signing all documentation, each individually, in accordance to the contract. And so I had a right of signing all documents which were appropriate for issuing and requesting for permits, whether mining permits or any other permits, for permits from various Slovak institutions and organizations. And I did sign them as well.
And just to make it absolutely clear, you had that right at all moments
plnú
when you
právo.
were the executive from 97
všetkom.
until 2011, correct?
Plnú právomoc som mal.
Yes, indeed, I did have full authority.
That authority, and you were the person communicating with the authorities, correct?
If you say the term use,
You were the one who was signing the letters and applications.
Istěže.
Yes, indeed.
Obviously, you always made sure that the information which was provided to Slovak authorities was absolutely correct.
Som o tom presvedčený.
I'm convinced of it. Whatever I would sign with my full knowledge and awareness of them being correct.
And you believe that it really was correct, even with your hindsight knowledge that you have right now, you believe that the information that you provided to the Slovak authorities was correct?
Yes, I think that definitely so. There is no person who does not make mistake in the world, but in the most fundamental things, I think I have done all to the best of my knowledge.
Go to the first document that we have there, and it's a document which should be marked 15B.
Banské oprávnenie, áno.
The mining permit.
Because
Yep.
I have already a
Okay,
few documents.
thank you, Professor Stern. I have it here, I just forgot to read it. It is C22.
Kde to je to? Kde je tá 22?
Where is the C22? It's here, right?
I would say our internal numbering, you should not be worried
Oh,
by
I thought-
those C or R numbers that you will hear from time to time.
V poriadku.
Yeah.
That's okay.
The translators as well, I will refer to this document as the general mining permit. So, sir, would you agree with me that a general mining permit is a sort of general authorization for a company to conduct mining activities in the territory of Slovakia?
No, není to také všeobecné.
It's not as general. It's a very important document. Any company wishing to conduct mining operations needs to obtain such mining permit. Only then they may conduct mining operations. And to the mining permit, there are people required who have certified, and they receive a certificate that they may conduct such activities, so they are named on that permit.
This, would you agree with the simplification, and it is a simplification, that this permit basically attests that the company is competent to do mining activities in Slovakia?
Určite, môže.
Yes, definitely mining operations. So that is not only for the particularly Gemerská Polana deposit, but throughout the entire territory of Slovakia.
You mentioned one important thing which I want to explore with you a little bit more. If you could please go to page 3 of this document. It is page 2 in the English translation.
Trojka?
No. Is it? Okay, so it's 3 also in Slovak, sorry. No, it's 3 in Slovak and 2 in English. Yeah. This is the list of the so-called responsible persons in Rosmin, correct?
Áno,
And you were one of them, correct?
áno.
Yes, it's right here on the top of the my name and my number, birth number, and description of what I'm responsible for, and the number of permit issued by the mining office.
Could you please tell the tribunal what duties a responsible person has?
Such a responsible person needs to exactly stick within the Geology Act, must be familiar in detail with Mining Act, must be familiar with what are minerals, and must be able to write final reports be familiar with geological documentation, which I have done on my life, all my life. So I had no problem with that.
Mentioned that one of the duties is the duty to know mining legislation, especially the Mining Act.
Iste se.
Yes.
Iste se Saksan.
Yes, certainly. I was certified to do that in front of the mining office. So I was well tested and well examined in order to prove my knowledge of that.
Duty to be aware of amendments to applicable legislation.
No pozrite, pokiaľ
Well, if you have such certification, you also need to be aware about all the annexes and all the newly enacted norms which are relevant for such acts and such legal documents. So you need to have a general overview and general knowledge in this specific area. So yes, you cannot underestimate anything, and it is in my own interest to be well versed and well informed about the acts.
Informed that there was a mistranslation of my term amendments. I meant zmena in Slovak, not doplněk.
menu zákona, iste že, hej.
Well, yes, certainly.
Úplne
Or all the other additions to the law.
And you know that one of the central issues in this arbitration is an amendment which was voted in 2001 and came into force on the 1st of January 2002.
No, presne to viem.
Yes, I know exactly, because this was very important for us. It had tremendous impact. If I can elaborate on that, if I could explain, perhaps I can do so.
Nech sa páči.
Well, according to this new amendment in 2002, the mining area was basically removed from Rosmin company because there was one important new important condition, namely that the mining activities which were attributed to the owner of the certificate have to be started within 3 years of issuing the certificate or the permit. However, law is a law, but at that time this law was rather imperfect, because even the Supreme Court of the Slovak Republic stated that the term dobývanie in Slovak, that means mining, wasn't elaborated or explained enough. This is one of the main reasons why this exploitation mining area was taken away from Rosmin. This term on its own, or perhaps this confusion, was then understood also by the National Mining Authority, because in 2007 there was another amendment to this act, Geological Act, where this term exploitation has been further defined. Because in the first amendment, what is exploitation? What is mining? But you are not exploiting the whole deposit as a whole unit. Apologies for going into greater detail, but this is very important to understand for Gemerská Poloma. Gemerská Poloma, this is not just talk. This is a huge volume of about 400 meters depth. This is mainly magnesite and dolomagnesite, and 20% of this volume of this deposit are talc volumes or talc deposits. We were not interested in magnesite because this was not of our interest. It did not have sufficient quality. This was that assessment that we had. We were only interested in talc. And this was additionally explained in 2007. It was finally clarified in the new amendment to the Act that exploitation is the mining of a specific selected mineral. Our mineral was talc. If this would be the case in the version of the law in 2002, Rosmin wouldn't lose this, because we wouldn't lose this mining area, and we wouldn't be sitting here at all. This is very important detail, according to my opinion. This statement, it was also stated by the Supreme Court of the Slovak Republic that this was the biggest mistake done by the National Mining Administration.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. We will come to it a little bit later. Just one notice for translators with respect to the transcript. Mr. Rozložník always referred to dobývanie, which is excavation.
It is certainly not explanation, it's mining. That's precisely caused the problems. It's the Republic of Slovakia that is translating it as excavation.
Right.
It says mining, and the expert said mining. The interpreter said mining. So it's wishful thinking on behalf of Slovakia.
Right.
Okay.
Zistíte, lebo my máme
Well, certainly, if I can add perhaps on that, in Slovakia we have two terms. One is dobývanie and one is ťažba. There is a certain confusion between these two terms. It might be the same. The problem is that dobývanie, in terms of the mining law, is the exploitation of a selected mineral according to a predefined method, which needs to be approved by the mining authority. So according to the approved norm or method, only then you can excavate the given mineral. I'm not going to elaborate on that. Even the current version of the law is imperfect, because you excavate or you mine a certain volume of talc, it can be 1 ton or 1 kilo, and you take it up to the surface and you comply with the condition that you've started the process. But this is not mining itself in the Slovak term ťažba. The problem is that, in my understanding, is that if you take the mineral out on the surface and you transfer it into a product that can be sold, that's the whole meaning of the term ťažba, or mining in Slovak. When talking about the different versions of the law, 2002 and 2007, even the State Mining Authority understood that in the version of the law in 2002, there was this 3-year period for all deposits. So even deposits which reached the surface, there wasn't a problem to open up in 1 month such mining activity. But this was equally valid, and I'm going to exaggerate a little, this was equally valid for deposits which were 1 kilometer below the surface, where you need enormous shafts, where you need incredible winds. This is impossible to comply with within 3 years deadline. They finally understood this in 2007, and they have a different deadline for underground deposits, which is now 5 years.
Ďakujem pekne, k tomu sa ešte dostaneme niečo.
Know what the right translation is, but we will now come to it. 1 second. You mentioned, Mr. Rozložník, that I will use the Slovak term dobývanie is the activity which is permitted in the mining.
dobývacia metóda. Right.
Yeah, it's dobývacia metoda with his stated
The mining method.
call. I'm sorry for using that term. POPE, which is plan of opening, preparation, and excavation. And we have one of those documents
There.
here in the bundle. I will direct you to it, and we will clarify this
Tam je to
translation
jasne
issue.
dokumentované.
Yes.
It is clearly documented there.
Could you please go to tab 22? Which is C25. And this document actually, to some extent, illustrates the translation confusion, because if you look at the subject of this document, it says authorization of mining activities under the plan for the opening, development, and mining of an exclusive soapstone deposit in Gemerská Poloma.
Áno,
Yeah.
áno.
Yeah. Then we have the plan under tab 23, which is C 168. It is a C document, so this is a translation which was provided by the claimants. And if we look at the first page of the English translation, it says plan for the opening, preparation, and excavation. And if we then go to page 32, please.
42.
It's number 1.2.4. It says in English, excavation methods and data on their approval, reasons for their use, specific measures for implementation of new excavation methods. Mr. Roznik, is that what you had in mind when you were speaking about dobývanie?
Tu myslíte ten začiatok, keď som dobýval?
You talk about the beginning when I use the term dobývanie as a term. Well, I was talking about the deposit. Given the chaos in the usage of the terms, as you can see in Slovak, we have two terms, ťažba and dobývanie. The mining authority uses the term dobývanie because this is how they have classified when you have to issue an application for a permit and you are asking for a permit where they specifically define how you are going to excavate the specifically selected mineral. So here we are talking about the selected specific mineral within the large deposit. Therefore, I know what you are perhaps going to ask. However, the reasoning or the explanation I gave before, I still stand behind it.
And then to close that discussion, there also is in the Slovak language the expression baňská činnosť.
Isté, že banská činnosť.
Certainly, the term banská činnosť or something like mining activity, we understand a rather controversial situations on how to assess what everything falls under this term when you discuss this with the mining authority. Because, for example, this mining activity or banská činnosť is not a water treatment facility that cleans the waters that are leaving the shafts, for example. And they say that this is not mining activity. The mining authority says that you can start with the mining activity, but for example, the environmental office or any other office will not allow you to start the mining activity unless you have the water treatment facility. So there seems to be a certain confusion between different levels of authorities, and there needs to be a common understanding of this. Because according to my opinion, even this water treatment facility falls under the definition of mining activity, banská činnosť, because without cleaning, for example, the water from certain oil sediments, I wouldn't be able to start the mining on its own.
So just a note for translations, when I will use the English expression mining activity, I will be referring to banská činnosť. And when I'm using the expression excavation in English, I will be referring to dobývanie.
Áno, ďakujem.
Yes, thank you.
It's just imposing on the translator a translation that is contested. The amendment uses dobývanie, and the Supreme Court has clarified. So I would object to that. Why don't you use the Slovak term?
Viete,
I have no problem using the Slovak term, obviously, but
Yeah, but then the dobývanie, we know that each person has its own interpretation of it. Use dobývanie. The amendment says dobývanie. Are we in agreement with that? 2002. Okay, so use dobivanie. We think it's mining activity, as the translator said, and as the court said, and Slovak Republic thinks it's excavation.
Maybe you use in English dobivanie.
I shall.
English.
Okay,
Yes.
I will clarify one thing. Mr. Roložník, is dobývanie the same thing
Right.
as baňská činnosť?
Ja viete asi, na čo...
I think I know where you are trying to allude me to.
Odpoveď bude áno alebo nie.
Bývanie,
Dobivanie, allow me to explain on that. The Mining Act says that dobivanie is a certain set of activities, and this was confirmed by the Act in 2007. But the terminology, well, I mean, we perhaps need to find some common understanding whether we are using the term dobivanie. I've tried to explain what I understand under this term, because under the term ťažba, I already see the final product. Dobývanie is the mere process of how I obtain this specific mineral, in this case talc, and how do I take it out on the surface from the mine. So this is the difference that I see between these two terms. I think we should use only one term, as English is using only one term.
For baňská činnosť and dobývanie.
pre banskú činnosť, nie.
Not for banská činnosť, only for dobývanie and ťažba. Banská činnosť, as we have said, mining activity, this is everything that is a broader general term that includes a number of activities.
Definition. I will, just to illustrate it a little bit more with this document that you prepared. If you go a little bit back to page to page 22.
No, skoro som uhádol.
And there we have a plan for the opening, preparation, and dobývanie of the exclusive deposit by underground method. Would you agree with me, sir, that opening, preparation, and dobývanie are all mining activities?
Isté, že?
Yes, indeed.
Opening and preparation are not dobývanie.
The three different activities.
Činnosť. Hej. Otvárka je všeobecná.
Opening is a general term. I'm opening a deposit. Preparation is the next one, and then I'm exploiting it. But opening applies to in a location. I have a deposit. I wish to open it, make it accessible by mining activities for exploitation.
Thank you, sir. So thank you for your patience, members of the tribunal, with the complexities of Slovak language and its translation into English. We can continue. So I was asking you about the amendment from 2002. When did you become aware of the existence of this amendment?
I've realized that immediately as soon as the act came into force in 2002. And initially, one would have mixed feeling about this.
Registroval som ho,
Discussion
isté, že?
will be more focused if we go to tab 18. This is document R62.
Hej.
And this is the text of the new provision, correct?
Áno.
And the text states that the district mining office will cancel the excavation area or will assign the excavation area to other organization based on a selection procedure if the organization to which the excavation area was assigned does not begin the excavation of the exclusive deposit within 3 years from the assignment of the excavation area or its transfer, or if the organization interrupted the excavation for a period of time exceeding 3 years. Now,
I apologize. To make clear, this is the contested translation, correct? It uses the words
Yes.
dobivanie,
Yes,
right? And you're reading from your own translation.
yes, I am.
Okay.
It's
I just wanted to make that.
はい。
yes. The yes. The
Dobivanie,
yeah.
yeah.
My question is this: was it your understanding at the time that if Rosmin does not start excavation within 3 years, I should say dobývanie,
Ťažko sa môžem
Dobývanie.
teraz vyjadriť, ako som...
It's difficult for me to answer.
dobývanie within 3 years, it will lose the license.
Áno.
Yes. Certainly, I did realize it as an executive back then, and I've reminded the shareholders of this fact, that this act is coming into force, and then we had to think about this. But we have not extended the mining, we have not interrupted, apologies, the mining activity, which we did, but so we interrupted, but we have been fully aware of this. And we were of the opinion that with regard to having a foreign investor who wishes to continue in these works, he will continue mining activities as well.
Of your company, of this amendment,
Áno.
immediately when the amendment was published.
Informovať.
Po zverejnení.
Yes, I did inform them.
Takéto dôležité veci predsa...
Such important things must be made known to company owners.
Was it your understanding that if Rosmin loses its license in this way, it will not be able to reapply for the license?
No.
Yes, certainly.
I think that even if it's legal, I think that's in the competence of the witness.
Yes, certainly. How did I understand this, or how did I see that? I'm not sure, but I do realize that this is a serious section of the act.
Your duties as a responsible person of Rosmin, I think that we agreed that it is one of your duties to understand mining legislation. Do you remember that?
Však aj
Yes, I did say that I was aware of this.
I am asking you if it was your understanding that if Rosmin loses its license under this provision, then Rosmin will not be able to reapply for
No.
it.
I did understand this. Perhaps it could happen like that. It could happen. I was not, however, convinced of that, of us losing the permit.
Mr. Ložnik, this is not what I meant, and I apologize if that was not clear. I meant that in the event that Rosmin loses the license, Rosmin will not be able to reapply for it.
There is one decree within the Mining Act that you may not reapply a mining permit for mining activities if something like that were to happen. So there was a possibility of this happening.
We read, and which I invite you to reread, it is stated that the excavation area will be reassigned to another organization. Can you see that? Yeah. And this reference to another organization means that it cannot be the organization which held the excavation area before.
Tak to presne bolo.
This is exactly the way it happened. One cannot reapply within the proceedings to be selected for mining permit. That is something which the Mining Act clearly stipulates.
Okay, now I would ask you to go to tab 20. It is R183. Oh, sorry, I apologize. I meant 21. Apologies. 21, which is C20.
No.
So this is, Mr. Rozhnik, what we call in English a decision on assignment of excavation area. I believe there is no terminologic discrepancy between the parties concerning this document. This specific document was issued to a company called, in English, Geological Service of the Slovak Republic, correct?
Hej. Áno.
And this
Geologickej službe, hej. Geologickej službe.
Yes, it was Geological Service.
later transferred the assignment of this excavation area to Rosmin, is that correct?
Správne. Dohodou, hej, to existuje o tom dokument.
And if you turn the page,
Ideme na
you can see the content of the decision. And you can see that the decision quite precisely defines the excavation area that is being assigned in this decision. Is that correct?
Dobýval. No,
I correct you. You must not understand as excavation area. It does not mean that it's the deposit will be within the entire excavation area, because the excavation area is much larger, and it's defined by specific coordinates, as you have it in the documentation. So excavation area must be understood as a territory, as an area. Everyone submitting an application for excavation area would enlarge their area in order for someone else not be able to come in, because within the excavation area no other organization can any longer conduct any survey activities.
Resolution. Yeah, thank you. There is point 6 on the page, and it states that opening work on the Gemerská Poloma deposit shall begin no later than 31st July 1998. Can you see that?
vidím, pravda, že tu je, hej.
I do see it right away.
Okay, let's now go to the following document, which is tab 22, C25.
Toto tu? To, hej.
Yes, I see it.
This is a document which we call in English authorization of mining activities.
No, no.
In Slovak it's povolenie k banskej činnosti. And this is basically the permission for Rosmin to mine the deposit. And the mining has to be done in accordance with the plan for opening, development, and dobývanie.
No, no.
Correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And if we just go very quickly through those pages, I will not ask any questions at this moment. You can see that the authorization itself is very short, but it refers to the very long document that we have already seen and that we have under tab 23,
Oh, yeah.
and to which I would invite you to turn right now. So if,
Oh, no.
yeah, on the first page, we see the names of the authors of the document, and you are one of them, right?
Okay.
And it is together with Mr. Heidecker
Please, Chair.
and Mr. Chore.
Pánom Čorejom.
Yes, that's correct.
Then if you turn the page again, we have the table of contents, which shows that this is really an extensive document of some 40 plus pages. We then have a list of graphic annexes. So, Mr. Reložník, is it fair to say that basically this is the document which sets out in great detail how exactly the deposit will be first opened, then prepared, and at the end, dobývaný?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, certainly. It's a fairly detailed project. All the activities, mining activities, all the way from preparing the ground, all the mining works. You can see that here, what all has to be done for opening, for instance. So yes, indeed, we can agree with your statement. Certainly, some things in there could be missing, but the content which is in here is precisely in line with the Mining Act. The procedure is defined therein, and you can take it, and based on that, you will process all your documentation. So it's fully in accordance with the requirements of the Mining Act.
Thank you. Now please go to page 22. We already were there a while ago. And at the very end of part 1.2.1, there is a sentence saying opening works in Gemerská Poloma deposit will start at latest on July 31st, 1998. Is that correct?
It is there, it's written there, but basically, when we did the Pope, we've also conducted a sufficient amount of works. We've done new drillings and provided new supportive documentation. So I don't exactly remember whether that was the date on which it began, the works began. Whether we have retained the deadlines, I can no longer remember. I don't remember that. But in my opinion, it is not as significant because opening of deposit is not something simple. It's a very complex process. One may not operate with merely days because many problems may come up, many new data may come up, and it's difficult here to operate with months or sometimes even years.
Then, if we go to the, I have it on the following page 23, but maybe in your text it's on page 22, we have part 1.2.3, and this is the part of this plan which describes in detail how you will open the deposit, right?
Oh, no.
Yes.
And I would say the one technical specification for laymen like I am is the sort of table that we have there, and which describes...
On top?
Yes, this is what I have in mind, sir. Which describes what is translated here as a winds. I have been informed by our mining expert that a better English term would be decline. Could you please describe the winds or decline? What is it you were proposing?
I'll explain some basic terms. Because in the mining business, there are horizontal mining works with a certain inclination. There is a borehole in vertical shafts, but when you go through the foothill under a certain angle, you're drilling inside the mountain, then it's called, in Slovak term, is then called the whiz. And we've used the winds, and we've used ramp from German term rampe. Ramp in Slovak, however, means has a different meaning. But in Slovak terminology, it's a winds. It's part of the mining works with a declination of 12% into the underground.
Sort of spiral going down.
Isté, že
Certainly, spiral, because when we located the works in a valley, in a most suitable spot, in order for one to work their way on top of the deposit, they needed 12% declination of the winds. You would not be able to do it through such distance, so you're going to have to go in a curve, drilling in a curve, to come to the correct spot. That will take you not through a direct line, could be 1,000 meters long, but it would require you to change the 12-degree declination, which was not possible, because originally the winds, which was pursued by the German investors, it was considered the main mining works. That is why where you see there's a huge profile of 20 square meters, and that is the cross-section. Gross profile was more than 20 meters, which causes lots of problems, major problems. So the length of 1,000 meters, after explaining to you, was... let me make a comment on the side here. I kept telling the German investors that their so-called ramp, the winds, can never be the main mining works, because no one will allow you to build in that valley, which is natural protected habitat for Gemerská Poloma region, for Betliar and Rožňava villages, municipalities, for water wells, for you to be able to build a water treatment plant where you're going to have to take petrochemicals and treat them. So the risk of leaks into natural waterways was really large. You only need one single truck to have an accident carrying diesel fuel, and we were responsible for drinking water supply for a large number of population. Later, this may bring us to POPE2, what we have done. That no longer describes this particular spot to be the main mining works, because it was not realistic.
Sir, you mentioned the profile, the big profile. Is that because the idea was that the talc mined actually will be put on trucks, and the trucks would then go up the spiral, and then
presne ste to.
Exactly, you've correctly described it.
Keď sa tu vrátim,
Getting back to this, you may get to this, and maybe you ask me about the quality of mining works of Arima Muran company. We had a problem with them with this regard because they had not retained within this particular activity.
let's finish where the truck goes first. So the truck leaves the mine, and then...
dobre, hej?
Yeah.
Čiže to bolo
Yes, indeed, because that was planned so that they leave the mine And the first treatment will be done near the mine, because unless you do that, you are going to have to transport the ore somewhere, some kilometers away. Now imagine you are going to have to ship 100,000 ton annually of the talc ore somewhere. So the first treatment would have to be done basically milling the ore to a certain size grain. And then you're going to have to build a second stage treatment plant, where from the first stage plant already separated talc to certain grain size, as some of the producers require it, then you will produce certain given types and sizes of grain. So it's a fairly complex process indeed.
Transport of talc between the first treatment plant and the second treatment plant would again be done by trucks, correct?
Istéže obě zase
Yes, certainly. Again, trucks. Rosmin proposed for the second phase of processing several different locations. We have checked them together with our German partners. We were looking for a good spot for the second phase processing. Obviously, you need to have good infrastructure, connectivity to the grid, and also good broad infrastructure connections, because the talc cannot be just transported as it is once it's produced, because either it's transported in the big bags, or there are specially built rail carriages for that. We've even had discussions with the rail company. There were some French-made cars for transportation, because it's enough for you to have wind or rain on it while it's transported, and no one will take it away from you. No one will buy it. So it has to be specially sealed while transported.
You agree with me that when leaving the mine and the treatment plant, they would have to take a forest road for, I know, 5 kilometers maybe?
asi 4 kilometre.
About 4 kilometers, 4.5 kilometers.
The road runs parallel to a creek.
Istéže to ide tesne vedľa potoku.
Yes, quite clearly, it's right next to the creek. And had we the transportation as dense as proposed, the forest company already proposed that these 4 kilometers of the forest road, this needs to be expanded. And we also need to have a number of meeting points where the trucks can bypass one another. And as this road was right next to the creek, and actually on several points it was crossing over the creek over bridges. It was a very narrow valley, where it was also, we had also the high voltage line, and we also had the road, everything within the small valley.
And you also mentioned water sources of drinkable water in the area. Could you please explain where they were
Áno.
located?
V slovenskej legislatíve
In Slovak legal system, if you have a source of drinking water, you need to have a special protective area around it. It is specially labeled, it is specially designated around a specific water source. It has to be also specially fenced, and no activities can be performed there. Then there is a broader perimeter, which is protected. This is rather broader than the immediate perimeter. Also, many activities are limited there. For example, mining activities cannot be conducted there. And then you have the third perimeter, third zone. And in that one, we were supposed to have the winds. I do not necessarily agree with the hydrogeologist who was assessing this. I think it was rather the second protective perimeter, because if, as I have said, if diesel fuel enters the underground water, it immediately contaminates the drinking water sources.
Thank you very much. Let's go back to tab 22, please. Let's turn the page to page 2. We will look a little bit at the content of this decision. So first, in point 1, we have a specification of what is permitted, and it is to engage in mining activities, which in Slovak would be banská činnosť, pursuant to the submitted plan, underground and on the surface in such a manner as referred to in legislation.
No.
And then, if we look further down to the middle of the page, we have a sentence saying this decision and thus the authorization of mining activities is valid until 31st December 2002. Can you see that?
To je to, hej.
Yes, it's quite here, yes.
Tak to bolo POP.
This was how it was proposed in the POPE.
You that question, that this date comes actually from the plan that you prepared. And it is,
Ktoré sme vypracovali s Heidecke.
Yes, as it was made with Heidecke and the other colleague. The third colleague was not very active, but nevertheless, that is the case.
and then if we go to the last paragraph on page 2, the district mining authority says that it was possible to reach this decision in part because Rosmin holds mining authorization to engage in mining activities. Can you see that? Yeah. And this is the document that we saw under tab 15.
Čo boli predtým, pozrieme. Áno.
Yes, it was seen before, yes.
And do you agree with me, sir, that if Rosmin had not had the general mining permit, it would not have got the authorization, this authorization?
Logicky, keď nemáte.
Yes, quite logically, if you don't have the permit, no one can approve this for you.
Then still in the same paragraph, at the end, there is a reference to the transfer of the Gemerská Poloma mining area, which gives Rosmin the right to mine the exclusive talc deposit.
Kde to je?
There was a translation issue, I'm afraid. I just wanted to draw your attention to the fact that there is reference to the assignment of excavation area to Rosmin. I will go into, if you wish, I can look at the Slovak text.
Že právo vznik dobývať výhradné ložisko masne.
Yes, it says here the authority or the authorization to mine.
Under the assignment of excavation area, correct?
Isté, že.
Yes, quite certainly.
Again, if Rosmin had not had this right, it would not have gotten the authorization, correct?
Isté, že tak.
Again, yes, that is the logical flow. It is very important to have this mining authorization, and in order for you to have the mining area, you need to have the mining authorization, and then on the basis of that you prepare the POPE plan. Everything is linked.
Then if we go to the next page, it's also the next page, page 3, in the Slovak language. There is a list of documents
Áno.
that you had to submit together with the application for this authorization, correct?
Správne, správne.
Yes, again, correct.
Tu žiadosť potom musí
Again, the application was submitted by Rosmin, and it has to be consulted with all the other stakeholders who had to comment on that. They have to issue a positive statement on that during the process. only on the basis of their previous positive statements, then the mining authority could organize the final meeting where the organizations had the final opportunity, final possibility to raise objections. If they all agreed and they all have issued their positive statements, on the basis of that, this POPE was approved and mining activity was permitted.
Ability to contact those authorities and request the permits or opinions that they were supposed to issue.
To bola naša povinnosť.
That was our obligation.
And you were able to collect all of those documents, and therefore you fulfilled also this precondition for the issuance of the authorization.
Keby sme to nesplnili, tak
Had we failed, we wouldn't have received the approval.
So you had now the authorization, and you could start working. We have
Yes.
in an earlier document that you had committed to start opening works by the 31st of July 1998.
38.
Did you comply with that commitment?
Až tak si tie dátumy.
Well, I cannot recall the specific dates and the flow of the individual processes. Once the permit was issued, we needed to then write the project for the surface constructions and also for the mining activity in its own. This was done by approaching a company, Rudný projekt Košice, a respective mining company which is familiar with this type of activities, and for a significant financial amount, they prepared the blueprint for the individual surface constructions. There were numerous constructions, several ones we needed to have, and the project for mining activity was done by an Austrian project author together with Rudný projekt company. This was their business, we were not involved. Then this project again had to be approved by respective institutions, mainly by the construction authority in Slovakia. So they needed to issue the construction permit. So you can imagine that this is a complicated organizational activity, many tasks that have to be coordinated, and very often state administration, state authorities have long deadlines within which they can comment or raise objections, and they very often do not even react within the deadline. So you have to urge them, you have to ask them that, please, we are under stress, we need to know yes or no. Or do you have any objection or comment? This was mainly concerned with water. The water management company responsible for the river basin of Hron in Banská Bystrica, they had major objections on what everything needs to be done. Special water treatment plant were planned, not only for the mining water, but also for surface water, and also from all the other surfaces where these trucks will be parked. So from the perspective of projects and also time, this was very demanding. We needed to prepare all the documentation and also to receive the final permit to conduct such activities. They were even asking, even we had a bridge already built, they were saying we need to build a new bridge, again, for a substantial amount, and it was very specifically said what profile does the bridge need to meet in order to comply with, for example, flooding conditions. There was no other bridge in the vicinity, but still we had to comply with this criterion.
In mid-2000, you were finally able to find a contractor and start the works, correct?
No a potom nasledoval.
And then we had another phase, the selection of the provider of such activities, of construction company. So again, a number of different documents we needed to process. Fortunately enough, Mr. Heidecker was very experienced in this type of activity, especially in project works. So he has used some of the methods that are used in Austria. So he had a very detailed description of how each activity needs to be conducted, and especially in case of the mining works, how this has to be done. This in several copies, as they were requested. I think there were 7 applicants in the call for proposals, so we had to distribute this technical documentation to all the bidders. They needed a certain time to analyze the documents, and then they submitted their bids. And that had to be analyzed afterwards with the presence of us as executive officers and also the shareholders, Dofner Company and Thyssen-Schachtbau, and we have selected the final successful bid. And quite clearly, even Rima Muraň submitted a project, who was a 43% shareholder of the company. At the end, not quite clearly, but it was awarded to Rima Muraň company, who received this 71 million Slovak crowns volume of contract to construct the surface buildings and also to construct the initial wings. We have signed a contract with them on the delivery of works, on the execution of works, according to a very specific criteria from our side. There's a very detailed contract, I'm sure you have it in your documents, where it clearly stipulated the conditions for the company, what everything has to be complied with.
Was EuroGas a 55% shareholder of Rima Muraň at that time?
Pozor,
Look, I guess it was as follows. I was hardly aware of how these things worked. For me as an executive, it was company Rima Muraň. They were the owners, and what their shareholdings were and how they were arranged, how they would share their percentages with Rima Muraň, that was none of our concern, really, at that time. It did not interest us, but it did not have a major impact on our work, because as long as they would invest, as long as they would provide the money, work could go ahead. And Rima Muraň basically did not fund this, but it was all funded on their behalf by EuroGas or Belmont, or I'm not quite sure. I don't have that information at my disposal, so it's difficult for me to respond to that. Important for us was 43% shareholding by Rima Muraň, who would to share in funding the project accordingly, and also implementation on the mining activity.
You mentioned, sir, that the price was 71.5 million Slovak crowns.
presne, ale
Yeah.
tak asi.
Approximately like that.
The tribunal, an idea, how would you know how much that could be in euros?
You just divided by 30.
Even though I'm a lawyer, I 71.5 divided by 3, it's almost 2.4, right?
No.
Yeah, so 2.4 million euros, correct?
Tak.
Do you remember when Rima Muraň started to do the work, actually?
Well, we began. I would have to, search my memory a little bit.
Povedať jej k tomu.
I'm not able to say it exactly when it began.
Would you agree with if I tell you that it's...
Malo to všelijaké slávnosti,
It had various festive openings.
ale tak asi, no.
Yeah.
Asi tak.
Approximately so, yes, it could have been.
Go to Article 10 of this agreement.
S Rima Muráňom.
Yes.
With Rima Muraň?
Oh, we are not there, sorry. I got there, but forgot to tell you to get there. Please go to tab 24. This is the agreement that Rosmin signed with Rima Muran, and it is C218. And so if you go to Article 10, at the very end, it says completion of the construction, disposal of the construction site according to the schedule for the construction of the edit, no later than 343 calendar days after the official start of construction.
Yes, I remember that. It was 340 days. I remember that figure somewhere. It was in a contract stipulated.
Was to open the deposit within 1 year, correct?
Áno.
Yes, of course. It was not met.
Now we are at the level of the
Aha,
plan,
Hej.
and that because the agreement was signed in September 2000, that would be approximately September, maybe October 2001, correct?
Áno. Asi tak.
Approximately so, yeah.
The authorization of mining activity was set to expire at the end of 2002.
Správne?
Correct. All I can say to that is that, of course, the mining office will not issue to you a POP for a very long time. So when they gave us permit until 2002, so then in 2001 we had the obligation to produce another POP to have it yet again approved.
Ale potom nastali tie
But then the interruption of works had occurred.
Yeah, but let's say the plan was that you would be done with the opening works by, let's say, October 2001, and you then still had 14 months under the existing authorization to dobývať.
áno. Terminolo,
The dates are correct as you've described them.
Now, please go back to your witness statement, sir. Part 5, paragraph 41.
tu.
And in this part 5, which actually starts at paragraph 41, you describe the dispute which developed between Rosmin and Imam Uran. And I want to ask you specifically about one statement that you have in paragraph 45. It is the second sentence. In the second sentence, you say that, contrary to what Rima Muran may have stated at the time, Rosmin was not in default of any payment, nor was it in financial distress. Can you see that?
Túto časť, pravda, že?
Yes, this part.
Do you maintain this testimony, sir?
Isté, že
Yes, certainly. We had no unpaid invoices.
okrem toho,
Except this, there is 7% mentioned. I don't know if I'm supposed to respond to that.
Ask you to go to tab 26. It is document R168. If we go to the first page of the document, we can see that you are the author,
ročná správa, hej.
and you prepared it on 16 January 2001, correct?
V poriadku, v poriadku.
That's correct, yes.
Go to part 2.2. you basically state that Rosmin had 4 employees, which included 2 executives. That would be you and Mr. Heidecker? Do I guess right? Yeah.
Correct.
Economist and an administrative worker.
No, no.
And then we have part 2.3, which is called realized works. Then please turn the page again. I will need to make sure that in Slovak it's also on that page. Yes, at the end of the following page, the very last paragraph.
90%, že?
90%, yes.
Then, so the first sentence says that 90% of surface construction was completed. And then second sentence states that in December, as a result of the project financing by the shareholders of Rosmin SRO, the progress of the works was limited. Can you please explain this sentence?
I will explain this as follows. Back then, we even had problems with Rima Moran with technical completion, coming up with a new contractual amendments. It says 95% here, but this was technical construction of individual construction sites. But Rima Moran, over the entire time, never handed over to us a single construction into our usage, which they were obliged to do so. They were supposed to have a final permit conducted for those works and then give it to us for use. Now, on the winds, which I mentioned was 93 meters long, there was a storage of explosive, 43 meters long, part of it. There was supposed to have been a major cost expended for that purpose alone. 93 plus 43 ended up costing us nearly 20 million crowns. So had there been such conditions with the remaining 1,300 meters, then the 71 million, later with amendments 73 million, would have had to be increased by about threefold. So at that stage we were already considering that such a winds in such a profile would cause major problems, because when you're drilling such a major, huge, large profile, the explosion work will disrupt the entire stability of the entire mountain. There are increased pressures resulting from that, so you're going to have to reinforce with steel reinforcement equipment and components. So the entire length would had to be reinforced by costing meter by meter, and the entire shaft was planned to have sprayed concrete with netting. So later on, such work we realized was no longer possible with this method. It cannot be said that there would not be funding available, but back then we already started considering that this cannot continue this way. We're going to have to review the whole thing.
Result of the project financing by the shareholders. So what did you have in mind when you put those words into this document?
Pozrite,
Look, there are certain situations in a company that money is within certain deadlines not made available. Monies were coming from Canada, there were bank transfers conducted in this way, so there were difficulties of certain kind, but these were overcome. These were resolved. I know that everyone wants to have money immediately, but the difficulties were there. But nothing can be done without any difficulties, but these difficulties were overcome, in fact.
Could I ask you now, please, to go to the following tab? It's tab 27, document R124. And this is an amendment to the contract that Rosmin had with Rima Muran. It was signed on 20 April 2001. And I would ask you to go to paragraph 2. Paragraph 2, second, or Article 2, second paragraph, states, the original contract should be amended due to deadlines for completion of individual construction phases. The deadlines provided in the original contract were not observed due to fault on the part of the customer, who failed to fulfill its payment obligations vis-à-vis the contractor. Mr. Rozhnik, the customer is Rosmi, correct?
Yes. Áno.
Yes, indeed.
And this is an agreement that you signed on behalf of Rosmin, correct?
Správne.
Correct. I think I've signed this.
Hej.
Yeah.
I understood correctly.
Co-signed, yes. Could I ask you now to go back to tab 25? Tab 25 is document C342. It's a monthly report on the activities of Rosmin for October 2001. Now, we have a translation problem, Mr. Rozložník, which I apologize for the inconvenience, but this is a document which was filed by the claimants, and it was filed only in the English language. So I suggest to proceed as follows. I will read the content out loud. It will be translated for you by the interpreters, and you will understand. I will not read the whole document because it's quite long, but if you believe that I should read and therefore make sure that you get the translation of a bigger part, then what I will do, just let me know and I will do it. Yeah, okay.
Only give me the gist.
First of all, maybe, do you recall making such monthly reports to the shareholders of the company?
When the report is here, when the signature is here, I think... No, this is something else. There are no signatures here? But I guess so.
Určite to.
Definitely. I definitely had knowledge of such a report being written.
Last page, it states that you are one of the authors together with Mr. Adyagor, so probably this is correct. So you agree that this is correct, so do you?
Aha, toto, hej.
Yes, I see it. Here it is. Yes, back then, I'm not sure whether he was already executive, Mr. Adyagos, or not. I don't remember exactly. But he was the main shareholder of the company by 57% shareholding. So when it was in English only, when a 57% shareholder signs it, I suppose...
This report was prepared on November 8, 2001, and this was after the entry of Belmont into Rosmin, so it is addressed to the two then shareholders, Rima Muran and Belmont. Do I have it right?
Correct.
Okay, so in part 1, we have personal situation. Mrs. Morikova,
Hej.
bookkeeping.
Áno.
You, Dr. Rozložník, managing director.
Áno.
And then Mr. Zahoransky as construction supervisory person.
Hej.
And then in 2, it describes the activities of the company. 2.1 basically describes what has been construed or constructed by Rima Muran and other until that date. And the one part which I find very interesting is part 2.2.1. which is called Financial Position and Investment State. And now I will read it out loud for you to understand what's written here. The states of accounts of the Rosmin Company to November 9th, 2001 are as follows. VUBAS Rožňava, 28,922 Slovak crowns, 18, was it hellers, right? Then HVB Košice, 179,731.60 Slovak crowns. Total 208,653.78 Slovak crowns equals approximately 6,889 Canadian dollars, or 9,409 German marks. And then it goes on and says, from the above mentioned, it is resulted that the Rosmin Company is in insolvency, also with respect to its own company operation, whereby following problems will be occurred, such as communication disconnection, legal payments to state authorities, etc. Can you see that, sir? Sir, do you maintain your statement in paragraph 46 of your testimony that, and I cite, Rosmin was not in default of any payment, nor was it in financial distress?
No, objavte
In my paragraph 40, I was always leaning on bills and invoices and payments, so I said this, or written this in 46, when payments were made. What it was and how it was through banks, and all the difficulties, that's a different thing entirely, but you have to understand this particular paragraph that I would always follow, whether we have all the payments, receipts will get handed to us, or invoices, whether we have paid them all.
Document that we have just seen, tab 25, says specifically that Rosmin Company is in insolvency.
It is signed by a 57% shareholder who I guess had put this together with the accountants. It's difficult for me to respond to that now.
We are in November 2001. This is the time when Rosmin notified the district mining office that it was suspending mining activities, correct?
Prerušený.
Interrupted.
This is what I meant. I don't know how it was translated. Yes. Yeah. I understand from your witness statement and that the reason why the mining activities were suspended is that you had this dispute with Rima Muraň. Is that correct?
To a certain significant extent, yes.
Financial situation of Rosmin that is described in this document a reason why it was suspended?
Look, I'm a geologist, I'm a bit of a technician. So the main reason for me was that one cannot continue in this way technically. That was the main reason for me. Of course, the financial situation at a certain stage could have been problematic, but consequently it was resolved.
Did you try to replace Rima Muraň with another contractor?
You have to understand this as follows. We had to first conclude the contract we had still pending with them, and they themselves have withdrawn from the contract, Rimamuran. They stated that we are not capable of making payments. But it was not exactly so, because payments were made, but they would complain sometimes of not having money. Let me give you an example. They had a bridge built, which cost nearly 2 million crowns, but they were not capable of handing it over into use. Because of the 2 million, we had deducted 7% as per contract as a withholding amount, which will be then paid after we received from the building authority that the bridge is completed, and can be put to use. All they needed to do was this, and the remaining 7% held by us could have been paid back to them. And there were many such cases of small works. So, and when Rimamuran would complain like this, one always needs to understand this, that they would also still be a 40% shareholder of Rosmin. Please do understand that. Those were the things back then, that they would own a high power electricity line coming to us, and we would pay them rent for that monthly.
Question.
Next time.
I don't want to
Did you try to replace Rimamuran with another contractor?
Áno.
Yes, we tried. Because during the suspension of works, it was difficult for Heidegger leaving. Whatever the reason were, I've heard something that he was asking for a different payment. Okay, that's merely for him to explain, or the other shareholders to explain. But back then, the only one remaining was Mr. Steck, a very important director who built many tunnels which could be compared to our ramp, because the mining works is very similar to his expertise. So we would go with him over many alternatives, what needed to be done. Coming to a very logical conclusion that we shall decrease the WIS profile to half. It would result in considerable savings, and he drafted a detailed economic overview of all the activities ranging from cost down to personnel, to reinforcement, to shift work, down to for the ramp itself, and for horizontal hole of 4.2 kilometers long, and for a vertical shaft. He worked on all of that. We together have come to a conclusion that yes, this could be feasible, that the ramp will not be the main works, mining works, but it will be in the future serving as a second egress exit, because as per the Mining Act stipulating each mine needing to have 2 exits. And this was our plan during the suspension of works. And of course, when in 2001 works was suspended, we would work on this intensely over that period. I've conducted a new Pope studies until 2006. The deadline, I think it was November. It was only stipulated before, because that was the deadline until when we've had the forestry growth excluded from a forest as classification. We had to do that for excluding a part of forest for loss of production of timber. I don't remember the exact dates, but it was November 2006.
I believe that we are a little bit out of time sequence now.
Zachádzam detaily, hej.
No, you,
I'm getting into too much detail, right?
let's say, describing the future from the perspective of my question, because my question was related to November 2001 very specifically. And this is because we all know that under the authorization of mining activity, you had the plan approved until the end of 2002, And therefore you still had 14...
26.
No, the first one.
Juist, ja.
Yes. And you still had 14 months to go. And my question is whether during that time, in November 2001, knowing that you had 14 months of authorization, whether you tried to replace Rima Muraň with another contractor.
Well, look, 14 months, it's nothing, especially when we talk about mining activities. If you are trying to select a new provider, new contractor, you will start the whole process from the scratch.
Plan.
No,
Because you need new pope.
Don't understand each other. My question is, why would you need
Jij,
a new plan? Because you still have the
Teraz
authorization
som,
valid until
Hej.
the end of 2002
Hej.
under the old plan.
prepáčte, hej, to troška to, hej.
Apologies, I misspoke. Well, during these 14 months, it wouldn't be feasible, it wouldn't be enough to go through the whole selection procedure. It is very difficult to conduct the whole process because you have to start the whole procedure. You have to go through all the steps again. Look for the you have to start with issuing the notice, you have to approach all the possible construction companies. So we've tried to reevaluate everything from the point of view in that time. The interruption of mining activity can be done only for more than 30 days, but you could interrupt the mining activity of up to 3 years. So you couldn't extend the period of 3 years. That was the maximum possible interruption. After 3 years, you had to again commence the mining activity. So what that meant is that we were trying to make good use of that time. It wasn't really easy to redesign the whole project. Already then, we were in discussion with several experts. We were in discussions with other mining companies discussing how to change such winds. What different machinery do we need? What different drilling equipment do we need? What voltage line do we need? Because the high voltage line was basically destroyed by Rima Muraň. It wasn't functional. There was a windstorm. The lines were interrupted. They had disputes with courts, with the court disputes with the forest company for not paying them rent. So if you accumulate the whole amount of problems, the 14 months which we had are insufficient. This is an insufficient amount of time. Well, you can say that we halted the activities because of lack of funds. Well, this depends from different opinions. Everyone can talk from their own perspective. But I think that from the perspective of new owners, it would mean giving up this mining area, and we wanted to continue. So the financial flows from Belmont and from EuroGas, these financial flows were reinstated. So the money started to flow again, and we could finance those works which eventually did start.
I understand correctly that you wanted to change the method of opening the mine?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
And that means that you needed to prepare a new plan.
Yes.
That on the basis of this new plan, you had to apply for a new authorization of mining activity, correct?
Yes, we would need a new Pope plan. But this was done.
The existing authorization was linked to the old plan, and it was not valid for anything else, correct?
Oh, no.
Thank you.
Yes.
You notified, as you explained, thank you, the Slovak authorities that mining activities were suspended. Did you also notify them at that time that you were planning to change the opening method?
No,
Well, I don't think that this information wasn't that precise. We did not inform the mining authority about changing the opening method because we were in the process of preparing the new POPE, and we would explain to the mining authority specifically in the plan what is our intention. In the second POPE plan, the original idea was that if you have the second POPE plan, well, you can see that we were proposing in the second POPE what already is being done by EuroGas. 4.2 kilometer shaft, which in the Rosmin POPE is already projected. So there is the shaft exactly on the same spot as we were proposing it back then. So if we would continue in the winds, we would enter the deposit in 2006, and we would be able to take samples for processing outside of the mine, and we would be in the process of obtaining all the permits for basically of locating all the adits which currently EuroGas has. That's very difficult because you need to purchase the land first, and you need to approach all the respective institutions which need to authorize such a procedure. But this was already the time period 2005 to 2006. So it was complicated.
For the tribunal and others who didn't have the chance to visit the site as I did, to understand what we are talking about, could you, I will try to describe it and you tell me if you agree with that. So the idea is that the decline starts from, I wouldn't say the top of the mountain, but almost the top of the mountain, and it goes down to the deposit. An alternative way to get into the deposit is from the side, horizontally, and this is the adit, which actually today is used to operate the mine. Would you know, Mr. Ložník, how far away the decline and the mouth of the adit are from each other?
The distance is not that important, the geographical distance from the adit, because you need to go through the whole long valley. Perhaps we are talking about some 8 kilometers from the winds.
And the mouth of the adit is
4 kilometre dlhá dolina, potom...
Yes, you have 4 kilometers of the valley, then you have the state road, and then you have the side road to the adit. My estimate is 8 to 10 kilometers, perhaps not 10. 8, 9 kilometers.
something very different from your original plan.
Yes, definitely. Very different. What is important, if I may, I don't know if I don't talk at too much detail, but I was already trying to convince both Dorfner and Thyssen that their solution is not a good one, that the best solution is to have a long horizontal adit, but nor Dorfner was ever involved in such activities, mining activities. He was involved in surface mines, nor even Thyssen had ever such a type of activity performed. They were doing deep shafts all over the world, but they had not specific experience with this. And I was trying to explain them that we cannot have any surface treatment plant in this valley, and we need to calculate with the fact that this deposit will be mined over several decades, and the transportation will be very expensive because every kilogram of ore has to be exported, has to be taken up to the surface by vehicles. Every liter of water which will be in the mine has to be pumped to the surface. And the moment you construct the long 4-kilometer adit, the water will just drain out on its own, and you can just shift the trolleys with your finger because you have a small decline, and you can immediately approach the surface treatment plant. There was a huge place where we could build the surface treatment plant, and this is where EuroGas specifically has a treatment plant. Everything is in the Pope plan.
You mentioned, Mr. Rozložník, the problem with water. Is it your recollection that the decline was flooded after the works were suspended?
Pozrite,
Well, on one hand, it was flooded, this decline, but for the miners, this is a great advantage having water there, because you need water in mine. And if you need water in mine, you have to ask specifically water management company to drain this water from the creek, for example, specific volume of water. And by building this explosive depot, which was built exactly below one creek, they have access to the perfect drinking water. Because during the interruption of works, we were doing chemical analysis on a monthly basis. We have hydrogeological statements on that. We were following the output of water, the quality of water. It is a good quality water, and the water which is now there can be consumed at any moment, because you just make a small pool in the middle of the winds, and then you can use this water for concrete production, for your own personnel, and you have your own water.
Yeah, but in order for you to resume works on the decline, you had to
to není
drain
problém. Tu
the
vodu
water
vyčerpať.
out first.
Však my sme ju...
This is not a problem. We did pump it out when we were starting the works. The new partner for Siderit was pumping the water. They have finished in 1 week.
If you were to continue
Yeah.
mining the decline, you would also have to pump the water out, right? Continually.
Však to není problém.
That is not a problem.
Yes, but it's not a problem, correct?
Tam, že to, áno, ale to vápa.
This is not a problem at all, because water flows just behind the horizon of the ramp where it starts to decline. So the difference in the horizontal difference is perhaps 5 to 6 meters, where you have to start pumping, and you can perhaps make one more drill into the valley from the decline, and it will flow on its own into the valley. It's not a problem.
In paragraph 48 of your witness statement, if I may ask you to go to paragraph 48, you describe your successful efforts to obtain an extension of the permit for the construction of above-ground structures. Those structures were basically structures which were to be built at the mouth of the decline, and some of them, or maybe even all of them, related to treatment of water. Is that correct?
No, nie väčšina, hej.
Not a majority of these structures. Perhaps one third were connected with water treatment. But if you receive a construction permit, it also gives you a specific deadline within which you have to complete the construction. So we had to apply for new construction permits. As a matter of fact, what I had to process is that the bridge had to be authorized and also put into use.
Because in 48, at the very beginning, you say that on June 21, Rosmin was granted an extension of the permit for the construction. And on October 4, amendment and so on. So it does not look like you are referring to new permits, but seems that you refer to simple extensions or amendments.
O predĺženie povolenia, hej.
Yes, extension of the permit. Not a new permit.
I'm not sure to understand everything. I understand there's a change of plan, a new pope, but it seems that what Siderit was starting to do was in a location in connection with the winds and not a horizontal tunnel very far away. So
Yeah,
I don't understand. If you could ask a question,
Ja to vysvetlím.
I would.
but better than I can do.
Yeah. I'm trying to do this chronologically, so we will approach that when we come to 2004. Or I can ask those questions. In any event, we will not be able to finish today. So whatever you prefer.
Do as you like, provided that at some point
Yes.
there is a question which clarifies this.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will do that maybe tomorrow if you can be patient overnight.
You better answer. You better ask.
Yeah, we will just clarify this. When you hired, I will ask you the question if
Aby
you
som
don't mind.
vysvetlil, hej,
Just to explain, the POPE only concerned the ramp. The second part of the mine was POPE outlined as a future activity. Once making sure the mining office is notified in advance what's going to be happening.
What you were planning to do and what you were doing in 2004 was not the edit.
to nebola štóňa.
No, that was not the edit.
To bola naznačená.
will-
It was an idea outlined for the future. But it is part of the POPE. It is there.
Come to it later, maybe when we start discussing Siderit.
I'm trying to guess. The surface constructions could stay in the same place, whether it was the winds or the horizontal?
I was going to ask that question, Mr. Chairman. Yes. Yes, I was going to ask you the question, precisely this question. So,
Vysvetlím vám.
I'll explain. Once we've selected a new contractor, Siderit, it was one mining company which used to employ 1,000 employees before. They used to mine for Siderit ore, and they had many mining works which we normally do, and they've already had built up the entire infrastructure we needed. So they had storage for explosives, they had various ramps, excavation equipment, housing facilities for workers, for miners, which would no longer be needed on the site itself because it would be sufficient to ship the people for every shift. They only needed maybe 10 to 12 people by a small van.
I will break it down. So, for example, the water treatment plant. Did you need it?
Tá tam musela byť.
Yes.
That had to be there.
A nielen tá jedna.
Not only that one, they've decided they've already built a second one, second water treatment plant.
And this
Aj
is
určité hygienické.
And also there was some hygiene equipment needed to be there.
during the construction of the decline, there would be water pumped out of the decline, and the water needed to be treated on the mouth of the winds. And then, if I may, much later, much later, if you were to build the adit, that would no longer be needed, correct? But
Už nie.
No,
construction of the adit, which was many years in the future, correct?
but that was not a major cost item because it's a special equipment for water treatment to clear it of petrochemicals. They have a sedimation tank, then they have a cleaning treatment plant itself, and then pumping out into the creek, which is then observed by taking samples whether it meets requirements for drinking water. So all of that operates automatically. There's no problem.
Still needed,
Ale bolo to
both under the
isté,
first
že-
plan and under...
Yes, certainly.
Sorry.
Nutné.
At the same place.
Okay, at the same place.
Áno, na tom istom mieste.
Yes, on the same place.
2004, was the idea of a winds forgotten to be replaced by another system, or because you mentioned earlier, Mr. Pikash, that the deflooding of the winds, so it seemed to be still envisaged. So
Yes, we can ask the
Nie, na úpadnicu my vôbec nezabudli.
No, we have not forgotten the winds. We would continue in that. We would continue drilling it. We had pumps ready, pumping the water out, and we were ready to begin in a smaller profile, continue drilling the winds, which would then consequently serve as a second mining exit available on foot. Now, EuroGas has 320-meter vertical shaft as the second mining exit. And this idea of the winds, where you could walk, use it for other purposes as well, in my opinion, was the more optimum solution as opposed to a 320 meters vertical shaft, which does not have an elevator, but only cranes.
I think I start to understand. There would be two accesses, but not for the same purposes. I mean, one for, I don't know, persons, or
Nie, nie.
one to extract, to excavate, and
Yes,
that's the horizontal one. But still, you needed this.
if I may
First one. Yes.
answer, if I may
Because-
interrupt the cross-examination and give you my answer. Under
Until
Slovak-
I've understood, I'll be asking questions.
okay, then I will explain it. Under Slovak law, each mine has to have two entrances. This is
poriadku.
for safety reasons. And so the idea was that the
Presne.
decline will become the,
Bezpečnostne, dobre, tak, tak.
Exactly, you say right. Secure safety reasons.
so under the original plan, it was supposed to be the principal entrance. Under the second plan, it was supposed to be just a safety sort of entrance, but it also was supposed to play an important part at the first part of the project, because the project would actually start, the second project, I mean, would start by building this decline, reaching the deposit, and as Mr. Rozložník already said, then some further samples of the talc would be taken from within the deposit,
Presne.
Exactly.
and then later there would be the adit built from the side.
Do you agree that's
Áno.
how you see things?
Yes, it's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful.
You're welcome, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for you, Mr. Rozložník, which is somewhat related to what we discussed already, and that is, why did you ask for an extension of the building permits for those surface structures while your authorization to conduct mining activities was suspended?
That is not related to mining activity. The permit was issued by water management companies. That is where we had deadlines extended, not with mining office, because it was not mining related.
Structures was not mining activity. Do I understand correctly?
Správne, to chápem.
It is mining activity. I explained this in accordance with the mining office. It is not mining activity, but in fact it is mining related activity when you had to obtain various other permits from other authorities, construction authority, water authority.
Not mining activity, but you disagree with that
Hey.
categorization.
Ale ja som presvedčený, že súvisí.
But I am convinced that it does relate mainly the water treatment plant from water resulting from mining activity.
That the mining authorities do not consider it to be mining activity.
Ja,
I doubt it. It should be mining activity because it directly relates to the mine. For God's sake, it relates to the mine. Without you having other structures there, you cannot conduct work.
Wrong way. I meant you do not dispute that it is the opinion and the decision-making practice of mining authorities that this is not mining activity.
Ale nerobí to žiadne problémy zo strany Banskej.
It does not cause any problems to the mining office because we would always resolve it somehow.
Or no to my question?
Yes.
Could you please now go to tab 30, which is document R276. This is a letter that you sent to the District Office Environmental Department. My understanding is that this is precisely the Slovak authority which is responsible for permitting of those water treatment facilities. Is it correct?
Správne.
Correct. They have a water department, this environmental authority.
If you look at paragraph 2, it states the entire structure has been temporarily suspended and no works are carried out on the object of the structure. However, the shareholders of Rosmin want to continue in the works yet this year after resolving all economic and technical problems which condition the suspension of the structure. Can you see that?
Vidím, pravda, že hej.
Yes, I see it indeed.
Again, refer to economic problems. What problems did you have in mind?
Tak ono to súvisí, čo sme už tam asi predtým hovorili.
I think it's related to what we mentioned before, that the economic difficulties. It's difficult for me to describe now what I meant back then. Perhaps you're asking, there was no money available. But everything was running, everything worked, because we would not work on the construction site. It was only personnel cost would be incurred for an economist, for myself, and a couple of others. So I meant that the economic part, by that I meant that once we have obtained all the additional permits, we needed to properly finance that.
V poriadku, takže tie peniaze ste v tom čase nemali. Tie peniaze potrebné.
Yeah.
For this continuation, no, I guess. The overview of bank statements is available.
You also state that the shareholders wanted to continue the construction yet this year. This is 2002. How did you know that they wanted to continue with the works?
I guess we talked about it back then. I don't know whether through email or over the phone. And they said, yes, they want to continue, and I took the statements as they were made.
If we read the following paragraph, I will again read it. However, further to the continuance of the structure, it is necessary to ask your office for extension of the building permit, the validity of which expires on 30 June 2002.
Áno.
Yes.
Arranging all essentials which are necessary to be submitted to the request for extension of term of the building permit, in particular the removal from the forest land fund for following years and the lease contracts with lessee Slovenskej republiky.
Áno.
Yes.
Understood that again you needed to provide further documents in order to obtain the extension. Is that correct?
No isté.
Yes, certainly. And we had concluded other contracts with the forest administration. Yes, indeed.
Mr. Pekash, I wouldn't like to interrupt you in the middle of a line of questioning. So since it's 6:25, maybe you choose
Yeah, thank you,
the
Mr.
best way to land, even if it's 5 minutes later than 6:30.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Now the last paragraph of it is We are sending you this letter for your information regarding our intentions with respect to the above-mentioned matter. So you recognize here that this is not a formal request for anything. This is
To není žiadosť, hej, ale
It's not a formal request, but we have submitted the request afterwards, but I first needed to process the extension for the removal from the forest land permit, and I had to adjust to annex it to my application for the district environmental office. So I was just informing them in advance.
let's go to the following tab, 31, which is R280. And this is another request for extension that you sent on October 2, 2003. Is that correct?
áno. Áno.
Yes.
So I take it from there that the shareholders' desire to start building in 2002 did not materialize. Is that correct?
No isté, že bolo pre...
Well, yes, the construction works were interrupted.
Sir, this is, I believe that this is the same surface structures that we were discussing in the previous document,
Isté, presne.
which did not
Exactly those.
on the authorization for mining activity, correct?
Nie, bolo to o tie isté.
This is the same amount of structures. The only difference is that Rima Muraň did not complete one, or they didn't build one construction at all. This was the water treatment plant. At the end, it was constructed by Siderit.
There's a part of the letter which starts with reason of the request to set a new deadline, and you state there, as a result of suspension of the mining activity, and so on, as well as of the change of the owners in the company Rosmin and the related financial problems, the deadline for completion of structures could not have been met. So again, you refer to some financial problems. Now we are in October 2003.
Asi tam môžem to len
Well, I can only confirm. If I have written this, it was perhaps the true.
asi, neviem ich posúdiť, hej, že do akej miery, hej,
It's difficult to assess to what extent, but I kept saying that eventually they have been solved.
And again, if we look at the penultimate paragraph of this document, you state, we are submitting the request to you in advance, for the time being without submitting evidence of the relevant decisions of the above-mentioned proceedings, or submitting other documents so that after your handling and delivery of them, you could decide regarding our request as soon as possible.
hej.
So again, this is not a formal request, just an information that you will be requesting something in the future.
No je to žiadosť.
Well, it is an application. We are submitting an application.
Apologies, but again, for the time being, without submitting evidence or submitting other documents.
Tak sú tu.
Well, there are annexes.
Yeah, I see those, but still in the text you say that probably it's not all that you needed to submit.
No možno tu.
Well, perhaps I was again hinting at the fact that certain institutions listed below have not issued their positive approval at that point in time. This was the same in case of the Pope plan, because for a long period we have been fighting with some of the organizations. We have been waiting for their permits in order to receive the final permit.
Much, Mr. Rozložník. Mr. Chairman, I think that would be a safe landing for the first half of my cross-examination.
Just half. I mean, two equal halves?
Now, as a lawyer, I firmly believe in bigger halves and smaller halves, and this one is the bigger one.
Thank you. So, Mr. Rozlovnik, it's 30, exactly. So we have to stop now, but you're still a witness under cross-examination, so you have to come back tomorrow at 9, and of course not talk about this case to anyone until you appear again in this room tomorrow. Thank you.
Áno, ďakujem, beriem na vedomie a dodržím, čo ste povedali.
Thank you very much. I take this into consideration, and I shall do as you've instructed me.
Thank you. Anything before we leave? No. So thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you.